The letter trembled in June Parker's hands as the stagecoach rumbled over another deep rut in the dusty road. Her future marriage to a stranger in the frontier town of Beaver, Utah Territory, was sealed within those pages. Yet her heart raced with equal measures of hope and dread. The year was 1876, and at 22 years old, June had made the most consequential decision of her life by answering a newspaper advertisement for a mail-order bride. "Not much farther now, miss," the stagecoach driver called back. "Beaver's just beyond that ridge." June nodded, carefully folding the letter from Mr. Daniel Wyatt, tucking it into her small leather-bound journal. 5 months of correspondence had led to this moment. 5 months of polite, carefully worded letters that painted the picture of a successful rancher seeking a companion, a wife to share his life with in the untamed Utah Territory. What those letters didn't reveal was the tremor of fear that coursed through her body at the mere thought of a man's touch. The memories of her past in Philadelphia of grasping hands and cruel intentions still haunted her dreams. Her parents' deaths from influenza had left her vulnerable to her uncle's household, where safety was merely an illusion. The stagecoach crested the hill, revealing the town of Beaver spread out before them, a collection of wooden buildings, a church steeple, and dusty streets that comprised the heart of this frontier community. June's throat tightened. Somewhere among those buildings waited the man she had agreed to marry. As the stagecoach rolled to a stop in front of the town's modest hotel, June gathered her courage along with her carpet bag. The driver opened the door, offering his hand to help her down. She hesitated before accepting it, her gloved fingers barely making contact as she descended. "Miss Parker." The deep voice caused her to turn sharply. A tall man stood a few paces away, his broad shoulders filling out a simple cotton shirt, a well-worn leather vest hanging open. His jaw was strong beneath several days' growth of beard, but it was his eyes that caught her attention, clear blue and watchful, taking her measure even as she took his. "Mr. Wyatt?" she asked, though she knew it must be him. He nodded, removing his hat to reveal dark blonde hair that curled slightly at the temples. "Daniel Wyatt, madam. Welcome to Beaver." June clutched her carpet bag tighter, trying to maintain her composure. "Thank you for meeting me. You must be tired from your journey. I've arranged a room for you at the hotel." He gestured toward the building behind them. I figured you might want to rest before we discuss arrangements." June blinked in surprise. She had expected to be whisked away to his ranch immediately, to begin her duties as his wife without delay. "That's very considerate. Your comfort is important to me, Miss Parker." Something in his expression softened. "I understand this is a significant change for you." As they walked toward the hotel, June maintained a careful distance between them. Daniel seemed to notice, making no attempt to take her arm or touch her in any way, and for that small mercy, she was grateful. The hotel owner's wife, Mrs. Abernathy, a plump woman with kind eyes, showed June to a small but clean room on the second floor. "Dinner's at 6, dear. Just come down when you're ready." Left alone, June sank onto the edge of the bed, exhaustion washing over her. She unpacked her few belongings, 2 dresses besides the one she wore, undergarments, a hairbrush, and her most treasured possession, a small framed photograph of her parents. Setting it on the bedside table, she allowed herself a moment of grief and uncertainty before washing the travel dust from her face and hands. At precisely 6 o'clock, June descended the stairs to find Daniel waiting in the hotel's small dining room. He stood when she entered, pulling out her chair with a respectful distance that allowed her to seat herself without their hands brushing. "I hope the room is satisfactory," he said as he took his own seat. "It's lovely, thank you." June smoothed her napkin across her lap, acutely aware of his presence across the table. As they ate their simple meal of beef stew and fresh bread, Daniel spoke of his ranch 8 miles outside of town, with a modest herd of cattle and a few horses. He mentioned neighbors, the weather, the challenges of ranching in the territory. What he did not mention was their impending marriage, and as the meal progressed, June's curiosity overcame her reticence. "Mr. Wyatt, about our arrangement." Daniel set down his coffee cup. "I wanted to speak to you about that." His eyes met hers directly. "Miss Parker, I know what you agreed to in our correspondence, but now that you're here, I want you to understand something. Nothing needs to happen that you don't want. Nothing at all." June stared at him, uncertain. I don't understand. I'm offering you a choice. You can stay in town for a week, get to know the place, decide if this is where you want to be. You can get to know me, decide if I'm someone you could. He cleared his throat. Someone you could consider marrying. And if not, I'll arrange transportation for you wherever you want to go. No obligations. But you paid for my passage west. That doesn't entitle me to anything, Miss Parker. Least of all to you. June felt something inside her chest loosen slightly. Why would you make such an offer? Daniel's gaze shifted to the window, where the last light of day was fading. My mother was a mail-order bride. She came west to marry my father, having never met him. She was lucky he was a good man who treated her well. But I've seen other women who weren't so fortunate. He looked back at her. I don't want a wife who feels trapped or obligated. I want a partner who chooses to be by my side. The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable. June found herself studying him more carefully, the way his hands, rough from work, handled his cup with surprising gentleness. How his eyes crinkled slightly at the corners when he mentioned his parents, the careful distance he maintained between them. I appreciate your consideration, Mr. Wyatt. I would like to take some time to become acquainted with Beaver. He nodded, relief evident in his expression. I'll be in town for the next few days delivering cattle to the railroad. After that, I need to return to the ranch, but I can arrange for you to visit, see where you'd be living, if you'd like. I would, June replied, surprised to find she meant it. The next morning, Daniel introduced June to several townspeople, including the preacher and his wife, who welcomed her warmly. The general store owner, Mrs. Holloway, immediately took June under her wing, offering her temporary work while she decided her future. Always need an extra pair of hands, especially one with such neat penmanship, Mrs. Holloway said after seeing June write down an order. Could help me with the accounts, if you're willing. June gratefully accepted, relieved to have something productive to occupy her time. As Daniel left to attend to his business with the cattle sale, he tipped his hat to her. I'll call on you tomorrow, if that's agreeable, he said. Yes, that would be fine, June replied, noticing how carefully he avoided crowding her, always maintaining that respectful distance. Over the next few days, June settled into a routine. Mornings were spent helping Mrs. Holloway at the store, afternoons exploring the small town and surrounding area. Each day, Daniel would find her at some point, sometimes joining her for a meal, other times simply walking with her through town, telling her stories of the area and answering her questions about ranch life. On the third day, as they sat on a bench outside the general store eating apple slices Mrs. Holloway had insisted they take, June finally found the courage to ask what had been on her mind. Why did you seek a mail-order bride, Mr. Wyatt? Surely there are eligible women in the territory. Daniel considered the question, turning an apple slice in his fingers. There aren't many unmarried women in these parts, and those who are, he shrugged. I'm not much for socializing. My ranch keeps me busy, and I'm not good at the kind of talking most young ladies seem to want. You speak to me easily enough. A small smile crossed his face. That's different. You ask about things that matter, cattle prices and water rights, not just dances and gossip. I've never much cared for dances, June admitted softly. Daniel's eyes met hers, something unspoken passing between them. Neither have I. That evening, June wrote in her journal, trying to make sense of her conflicting emotions. Daniel Wyatt was not what she had expected. His consideration, his respect for her boundaries without her having to explain them, his quiet intelligence, all these qualities drew her to him. Yet the thought of marriage still filled her with apprehension. On the fifth day, Daniel appeared at the store just before noon. I need to return to the ranch tomorrow, he said. Would you like to see it today? We could take the wagon, be back before dark. June hesitated only briefly before agreeing. Mrs. Holloway practically pushed her out the door. Go on, girl. See what kind of place you'd be mistress of. The journey to the ranch took nearly 2 hours, during which Daniel pointed out landmarks and told her about the land. His voice changed when he spoke of his property, deeper, more confident, filled with pride. It's not much compared to some, he said as they approached a modest homestead nestled against a backdrop of rolling hills. But it's mine, free and clear. The main house was simple but sturdy, built of logs with a stone foundation. A barn stood nearby, along with a corral where several horses grazed. A small garden was fenced off near the house, and June could see a chicken coop beyond it. I built most of it myself, Daniel said as he helped her down from the wagon, careful to hold the edge of the seat rather than her hand. Started with just the one-room cabin there, added on as I could. He showed her around the property, explaining his plans for expansion, the challenges of managing the ranch alone. When they reached the house, he paused at the door. Would you like to see inside? You don't have to. June nodded, curious about this place that could potentially become her home. The interior was clean and functional, with a main room containing a stone fireplace, a solid table with 4 chairs, and a rocking chair near the hearth. A doorway led to what appeared to be a bedroom, though Daniel did not take her in that direction. Kitchen's through there. He pointed to another doorway. Got a pump inside for water. Makes things easier in winter. June moved to the window, looking out at the land stretching away from the house. It's beautiful here. Peaceful. Can be lonely, Daniel admitted quietly. But there's something to be said for the quiet. June turned to face him, finding him watching her with those steady blue eyes. Where would I? That is, if we were to. She faltered, unable to complete the thought. I'd build another bedroom, he said immediately. Or I'd take the main room, and you could have the bedroom. Whatever would make you comfortable. The implication was clear he wasn't expecting to share a bed with her, at least not immediately. Relief washed through June, followed by a curious warmth at his consideration. As they prepared to return to town, a sudden summer storm rolled in from the mountains. Rain began to fall heavily, making the road treacherous. We should wait it out, Daniel decided, leading her back to the house. These storms usually pass quickly. Inside, he built a small fire to ward off the sudden chill, then set about making coffee. June stood awkwardly by the window, watching the rain lash against the glass. I should have checked the weather more carefully, Daniel said, setting 2 mugs on the table. I apologize for the situation. It's not your fault, June assured him, taking a seat at the table. Nature doesn't bend to our plans. As they sipped their coffee, the silence between them was broken only by the crackle of the fire and the drumming of rain on the roof. June found herself studying Daniel's hands, strong, calloused, capable hands that had built this home from nothing. May I ask you something personal, Miss Parker? Daniel's voice pulled her from her thoughts. You may ask. I may choose not to answer. He nodded, accepting this. In your letters, you told me about your parents, your education, your skills with sewing and cooking. But you never mentioned why you'd leave everything familiar to marry a stranger in Utah territory. June stared into her coffee mug, debating how much to reveal. After my parents died, I went to live with my uncle and his family. It was not a situation I could remain in. Daniel waited, not pressing further, but his eyes conveyed understanding. When she didn't continue, he simply said, I'm sorry for whatever happened to you there. And I want you to know that in my home, you would always be safe. The rain continued for another hour before finally letting up. By then, it was clear they would not make it back to town before dark. Daniel's concern was evident. This puts you in an awkward position, and I apologize. I can sleep in the barn. Don't be ridiculous, June said. I won't have you catching your death in a damp barn. You said yourself there's plenty of space here. In the end, Daniel insisted June take the bedroom, while he made a pallet near the fireplace in the main room. As June lay in his bed that night, surrounded by the unfamiliar sense of leather and soap that she associated with him, she realized something surprising. She felt safe here, safer than she had felt in years. The next morning, they set out early to return to town. The storm had washed the world clean, leaving behind a brilliant blue sky and air that smelled of sage and damp earth. They arrived in Beaver just before noon, drawing curious glances from townsfolk who undoubtedly wondered about their overnight absence. I'll speak to Preacher Evans, Daniel said as he helped her down from the wagon in front of the hotel. Explain the circumstances. Thank you, June said, touched by his concern for her reputation. When will you return to town? Saturday, he said. For the town social. I thought. Perhaps you might like to attend? Meet more people. I'd like that, June said, surprising herself with the truth of it. Over the next few days, June found herself looking forward to Saturday with an anticipation that both confused and alarmed her. Mrs. Holloway noticed her distraction. That Wyatt boy's got you thinking, hasn't he? The older woman asked with a knowing smile. He's been very kind, June admitted. Kind is good in a husband, Mrs. Holloway said. Passion fades, but kindness endures. June blushed at the mention of passion, something she had never associated with marriage, only with fear. Yet when she thought of Daniel, fear was not what she felt. Saturday arrived, and with it came Daniel, freshly shaven and wearing a clean shirt under his usual vest. He greeted her with a tip of his hat, and that same respectful distance he always maintained. "You look lovely, Miss Parker," he said, his eyes appreciative but not invasive. "Thank you, Mr. Wyatt." She had worn her best dress, a modest blue cotton that brought out the color of her eyes. The town social was held in the church hall, decorated with bunting and wildflowers. A small band played lively tunes, and tables laden with food lined one wall. Daniel introduced June to more townspeople, including several neighboring ranchers and their families. "So you're the brave girl who answered Daniel's advertisement," said Mrs. Campbell, wife of a nearby rancher. "We were beginning to think he'd die a bachelor out there on that ranch of his." "We're still getting acquainted," June said carefully. "Well, he's one of the good ones," Mrs. Campbell assured her. "Quiet, mind you, but honest as the day is long." As the evening progressed, June found herself genuinely enjoying the company of these frontier people. Their lives were hard but purposeful, their community tight-knit and supportive. When the band struck up a waltz, several couples took to the small dance floor. Daniel, who had been speaking with the blacksmith, returned to June's side. "Would you? That is, might I have this dance?" he asked, uncertainty clear in his voice. June felt a flutter of panic. Dancing meant touching, being held. She started to refuse, but something in Daniel's expression, hopefulness mixed with resignation, as if he expected rejection, made her reconsider. "I should warn you, I'm not very accomplished," she said instead. "That makes two of us." Hesitantly, June allowed him to lead her to the dance floor. When he placed his hand lightly at her waist, she tensed involuntarily. Daniel immediately loosened his hold, maintaining the barest contact necessary for the dance. "We don't have to do this," he murmured, his eyes concerned. "No, I want to try." They moved awkwardly at first, both hyper-aware of the minimal points where their bodies connected. But as the music continued, June found herself relaxing slightly, focusing on the steady rhythm of Daniel's movements rather than her own discomfort. By the end of the dance, something had shifted between them, a small but significant change, like the first green shoot breaking through winter soil. As Daniel walked her back to the hotel that evening, he asked the question that had been hanging between them for days. "Have you given any thought to our arrangement, Miss Parker?" June took a deep breath. "I have, and I think I would like to accept your proposal, Mr. Wyatt." He stopped walking, turning to face her with surprise evident in his expression. "Are you certain? You don't need more time." "I'm certain that I want to try," she clarified. "But I need you to understand something." She swallowed hard, forcing herself to continue. "I am not comfortable with certain aspects of marriage. At least not yet. Perhaps not ever." Understanding dawned in Daniel's eyes. "You mean the physical aspects?" June nodded, unable to meet his gaze. "June," he said, using her given name for the first time, "I promised you when we began corresponding that I was looking for a companion, a partner. That remains true. Whatever else may or may not develop between us will be on your terms, in your time. I give you my word." She finally looked up at him, searching his face for any sign of deception or resentment. She found none, only sincerity and something that might have been tenderness. "Then yes, Mr. Wyatt, Daniel, I will marry you." They were married the following Sunday after church services, a simple ceremony with the entire town in attendance. June wore her blue dress with wildflowers in her hair. Daniel, in a new shirt and polished boots, looked at her with such wonder when she spoke her vows that June felt a warmth spread through her chest despite her nervousness. The townsfolk hosted a modest celebration afterward, and by late afternoon, Daniel was driving June to her new home, her trunk and belongings secured in the back of the wagon. "Welcome home, Mrs. Wyatt," he said as they pulled up to the ranch house. June smiled at the name, still unfamiliar but not unwelcome. "Thank you, Mr. Wyatt." True to his word, Daniel had prepared a separate bedroom for her, adding a partition to create a private space with a small window overlooking the garden. He'd acquired a new bed frame and mattress, and someone probably Mrs. Holloway had contributed a colorful quilt. "It's lovely," June said, genuinely touched by the effort he'd made. "It's not much, but we can improve it over time," Daniel replied. "Whatever you need to make it comfortable." That first night, as a married couple established the pattern of their early life together. Daniel was careful to give June her space, never entering her room without invitation, never touching her without permission. They developed a routine, rising early to tend to chores, working side by side during the day, sharing meals and quiet evenings by the fire. June learned to cook on the wood-burning stove, to tend the garden, to manage the chickens. Daniel taught her to ride, providing a gentle mare named Daisy for her use. He showed her the boundaries of their property, the best places for wildflowers in spring, the creek where trout could be caught in summer. As the weeks passed, June found herself growing more comfortable in Daniel's presence. His patience never wavered, his consideration never faltered. When nightmares occasionally woke her, leaving her gasping and tearful, he would sit outside her door, talking softly until she calmed, never once attempting to enter unless invited. Autumn came to the Utah territory, bringing with it cooler temperatures and changing colors across the landscape. Daniel was busier than ever, preparing the ranch for winter, and June found herself watching him as he worked, the strength in his shoulders as he chopped wood, the gentleness in his hands as he tended an injured calf. One evening in late October, as they sat by the fire after supper, June working on mending while Daniel carved a small wooden figure, she found herself studying his profile in the flickering light. "May I ask you something?" she said. He looked up, setting aside his carving. "Of course. Are you content with our arrangement? With things as they are between us?" Daniel considered the question carefully. "I'm content being married to you, June. I enjoy your company, your conversation, the way you've made this house into a home." He paused. "If you're asking if I want more, then yes, someday I hope for more between us. But only if and when you want the same." His honesty touched her. "I'm trying," she whispered, "to be a proper wife to you." "You are a proper wife," he insisted. "There's no single definition of what that means. What we have is ours, and no one else needs to understand it." That night, June lay awake long after she should have been sleeping, thinking about Daniel's words. About the man himself, his quiet strength, his unwavering kindness, his respect for her boundaries. She thought about her fear, the way it had dictated her life for so long. The next morning, as they worked together in the garden harvesting the last of the vegetables before the first frost, June made a decision. When Daniel reached for a basket near her, she deliberately let her hand brush against his. He froze, looking at her with surprise. "Sorry," she murmured, though they both knew it had been intentional. "No need to apologize," he said softly. Over the following weeks, June gradually allowed herself more contact with Daniel, their fingers touching as she passed him a cup of coffee, her shoulder briefly leaning against his as they read by the fire in the evenings, her hand occasionally resting on his arm as they walked the property. Each touch was small, fleeting, but significant in its deliberateness. And each time, Daniel accepted what she offered without demanding more, his patience seemingly endless. Winter descended on the ranch, bringing with it snow and long evenings confined to the warmth of the house. During these quiet hours, they talked more deeply than they ever had before. June spoke of her childhood in Philadelphia, of her parents' love for each other and for her. Daniel shared stories of growing up on his parents' farm in Missouri, of coming west as a young man to seek his fortune. Neither spoke directly of the shadows in their past, June's trauma at her uncle's house. Whatever sorrows had led Daniel to seek a mail-order bride, but understanding grew between them nonetheless, built on the foundation of daily kindnesses and growing trust. As Christmas approached, Daniel spent several days mysteriously occupied in the barn, refusing to let June see what he was working on. On Christmas Eve, after a simple but festive dinner, he presented her with a gift, a beautifully crafted rocking chair, made from polished pine, with intricate carvings along the arms. "Daniel," she breathed, running her fingers over the smooth wood. "It's beautiful. Thought you might like something comfortable to sit in while you read," he said, watching her face anxiously. "Do you like it?" In answer, June did something she had never done before. She stepped forward and embraced him, wrapping her arms around his waist and resting her head against his chest. Daniel stood perfectly still for a moment. Then carefully, so carefully, brought his arms up to hold her. They remained that way for what felt like a long time. June listening to the steady beat of his heart beneath her ear, Daniel's chin resting lightly on top of her head. "Thank you," she whispered, "not just for the chair, but for everything, his patience, his understanding, his steadfast kindness." "Merry Christmas, June," he replied softly. That night, as snow fell gently outside, June lay in her bed considering how much had changed in the months since she'd arrived in Beaver. How much she had changed. The fear still lived within her, but it no longer controlled her every thought and action. And much of that change was due to the man sleeping on the other side of the wall, the man who had promised never to rush her heart and had kept that promise faithfully. Winter slowly gave way to spring. The snow melted, revealing tender green shoots beneath. The ranch became busier as calving season approached, and June found herself working alongside Daniel more and more, their partnership deepening as they faced challenges together. One particularly difficult night, in early April, a heifer was struggling with her first calf. Daniel and June spent hours in the barn, working to save both mother and baby. When the calf finally emerged, alive but weak, June cried with relief. "You did it," Daniel said, his own exhaustion evident in the slump of his shoulders. "We did it," June corrected, reaching out to squeeze his hand. They walked back to the house in the pre-dawn light, tired but satisfied. At the door, Daniel turned to her. "I couldn't have managed that alone," he said. "Thank you." June looked up at him, at this man who had become so much more than the stranger she had agreed to marry. Without overthinking, she rose on her tiptoes and pressed a soft, quick kiss to his cheek. Daniel's eyes widened, but he made no move to pursue more, simply touching the spot where her lips had been with wondering fingers. "Good night, Daniel," she said, slipping inside to her room, her heart racing with the small courage of what she had done. As spring progressed into summer, June found herself thinking more and more about the nature of her marriage. Daniel had kept his promise, never pushing, never demanding, accepting whatever she felt able to give. Their life together had fallen into comfortable patterns, their partnership strong and mutually supportive. But increasingly, June found herself wanting more, wanting to be truly Daniel's wife in all ways. The fear still arose at times, but it was countered now by something stronger: trust in the man Daniel had proven himself to be, and her own growing feelings for him. One evening in late June, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, June made her decision. "Daniel," she said softly, "I've been thinking about our arrangement." He turned to her, his expression careful. "Yes, I think I would like to change it, if you're still interested." Understanding dawned in his eyes, but he was careful not to presume. "What kind of change did you have in mind?" June took a deep breath. "I would like us to be truly married, to share a room, a bed, to be husband and wife in every sense." Daniel studied her face. "Are you certain?" "There's no rush, June. We have all the time in the world." "I'm certain," she said, meeting his gaze steadily. "I trust you, Daniel. And I care for you deeply." The smile that spread across his face was like the sunrise, slow, warm, illuminating. "I care for you too, June. More than I can say." That night, with gentle patience and constant attention to her comfort, Daniel and June truly became husband and wife. When fear threatened to overwhelm her, Daniel would stop, whisper reassurances, wait for her to decide whether to continue. His tenderness brought tears to her eyes, washing away old hurts and replacing them with new, healing memories. Afterward, lying in his arms, June felt a peace she had not known was possible. "Thank you," she whispered against his chest. "For what?" he asked, his fingers gently stroking her hair. "For waiting. For not rushing my heart." "I would have waited forever," he said simply. The following year brought many changes to the ranch. With the profits from a successful cattle sale, Daniel was able to expand the house, adding a proper kitchen and a larger bedroom for them to share. June's garden flourished under her care, providing vegetables for their table and enough extra to trade in town. In the fall, June discovered she was expecting their first child. When she told Daniel, his joy was tempered with concern for her. "Are you happy about this?" he asked, searching her face. "I am," she assured him. "Nervous, but happy. Very happy." Their son was born the following spring, a healthy, strong boy they named James, after June's father. Daniel proved to be as gentle and patient a father as he was a husband, his large hands cradling their infant son with incredible tenderness. As James grew, the ranch prospered. Daniel added more cattle to their herd, built a larger barn, hired a young man from town to help with the heavier work. June managed the household, tended her garden, cared for their son, and kept the accounts with the skill she had developed working for Mrs. Holloway. 2 years after James was born, their family expanded again with the birth of their second child, a son they named Thomas, who arrived during a summer thunderstorm with a lusty cry that made the midwife laugh. "He's going to be a handful, this one," she predicted. By the time Thomas was toddling around the ranch, following his older brother with determined steps, June had almost forgotten the frightened young woman who had stepped off the stagecoach in Beaver 5 years earlier. Almost, but not entirely, for it was the memory of that fear and how far she had come that made her appreciate her happiness all the more deeply. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching their sons play in the yard, Daniel took her hand, an action that had once seemed impossible but now felt as natural as breathing. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. "Answering my advertisement, coming west, marrying a stranger?" June looked at their intertwined fingers, then at their children, then up at the man who had kept his promise and, in doing so, had helped her heal. "Never," she said with complete conviction. "Not for a single moment." Daniel's smile was tender as he leaned in to kiss her, a kiss she now welcomed without hesitation, returning it with equal warmth. "I love you, June Wyatt," he murmured against her lips. "And I love you, Daniel Wyatt," she replied, the words as true and solid as the mountains that framed their home. 10 years after June had arrived in Beaver as a mail-order bride, the Wyatt Ranch was one of the most successful in the territory. Their family had grown again with the addition of a daughter, Emma, whose arrival had been greeted with joy by her parents and exaggerated disgust by her brothers, now sturdy boys of 8 and 6. The original house had been expanded several times, becoming a comfortable home filled with laughter and warmth. June's fears had not disappeared entirely. Occasional nightmares still disrupted her sleep. Certain situations still triggered moments of panic, but they no longer defined her. Instead, she was defined by the love she gave and received, by the family she and Daniel had built together, by the strength she had found within herself. On their 10th anniversary, after the children were asleep, Daniel presented June with a small wooden box. Inside was a gold locket containing miniature portraits of their 3 children. "It's beautiful," June said, tears welling in her eyes as Daniel fastened it around her neck. "Not as beautiful as you," he replied, his voice still holding the wonder it had contained on their wedding day. Later that night, as they lay together in the darkness of their bedroom, June traced the familiar contours of Daniel's face with gentle fingers. "Did you ever imagine, when you placed that advertisement, that we would have this?" she asked. Daniel caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "I hoped," he said simply. "I hoped for a companion, for someone to share my life with. But this you, our children, the happiness we've found, this is far more than I dared to hope for." June settled against him, her head finding its accustomed place on his shoulder. Outside, the Utah night was filled with stars, bright points of light in the vast darkness. Inside, in the home they had built together, June and Daniel Wyatt held each other close, their once separate paths now irrevocably intertwined. The mail-order bride who had been scared of a man's touch and the cowboy who had promised never to rush her heart had found, in each other, not just safety or companionship, but a love that continued to deepen with each passing year, a love built on patience, understanding, and the courage to heal.